Very good evening to you. Welcome to the King's Church and our Friday evening conversation. If you were with us for the last couple of weeks, you'll know that we've started a new series on discipleship. But I'm very pleased to welcome to the studio this evening Paul. Paul and I work together, and you'll soon discover in what context. And we're calling this evening Faith in Action. So we've talked about discipleship, about the calling to follow Jesus, and then last week Matt and Verity did a very good evening on commitment and priorities. Now this evening we want to sort of illustrate how that is worked out in life. And Paul has very kindly agreed to join me. If you've logged on, you'll know that you can add questions, put comments in, and we will respond to them as we go through the evening. If you're watching this as a recording later, then we will have read out some of the comments and questions so that you know what we're talking about. So, Paul, would you like to introduce yourself? It's very nice. Can I say, so that you don't think we're pulling a fast one on you, Paul and I know each other, we work together. So we're going to have a conversation. But Paul,
okay.
Yeah.
My name's Paul Foster. As Clive says, we've worked together for more years than we care to remember.
At least 12, 13, something like that?
12 years.
Yes.
12 years.
Yeah.
And we work together in a high security prison. And my job there is to be the Anglican chaplain for my sins, which must be many. I've done lots of things besides that, though. I've got a wife,
yes,
5 children, and 7 grandchildren. So that keeps me busy as well as...
I'm the one with the white hair, notice.
Yeah. and I look after an under-12s football team just to keep my feet on the ground and keep my perspective as well.
Well, part of your history was your love of football, wasn't it? That you, in a previous life, potentially could have done that professionally?
Yeah, I had trials for a couple of professional teams. Didn't quite make it. I was a goalkeeper. They said I wasn't tall enough and my hands weren't big enough. So, but I did a little bit semi-professionally for a while in the leagues up north.
Right.
And
we could tell you're not from around here.
No, I'm from Yorkshire.
Yeah, okay.
I'm from Yorkshire, from the footstool of heaven.
Oh.
And but I left there when I was in my mid-20s, which I'll probably come on to later on.
Yeah.
So I've spent a lot of time, mostly down the east of England, from all the way up in Yorkshire down to London and back again.
Okay,
so.
Yes, yeah. So as I said, one of the aims of this evening is the teaching that we regularly do, how it works out in life. Obviously this is going to be a particular situation, but I hope what we share is relevant to you. And if there are questions that you have or comments that you want to make about the judicial system, the prison system, but particularly chaplaincy within prisons, then please write your comments and we will respond to them. But to begin with, we're just going to learn a little bit more. Those in our church, you know a lot about me. But just learn a bit about Paul and certainly your background, how you came to faith and the beginning of ministry. So, Christian family, Christian heritage?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Well, actually, it's not quite true. I did discover when doing my family tree that my grandfather, who I never knew on my dad's side,
right.
So my dad was 50 when I was born. So I didn't know my grandparents on his side, but he was a Methodist lay preacher
right. Okay. Yes.
in Huddersfield.
Yes.
For quite a while, and he helped to start the Venn Street Mission, which is quite famous in Huddersfield at the time. So that was my only sort of tenuous connection.
Yes, yeah.
My father wasn't Christian. My mum's not a Christian. Didn't go to church, but they sent us to Sunday school.
As often happens, yes.
So they sent us to Sunday school until I discovered that I could set out for Sunday school with my 2 tuppence in my pocket,
yes.
and go to the shops and spend it and come back at the same time that Sunday school was meant to finish. And then I gave it a miss and played football on the field. Yeah. But there was something there all the time, and it was just after my smallest sisters were born. Actually, we got a new vicar in the church. He's quite young. He wanted to get lots of children's work going, young people and so on, and he bumped into me and he invited me to come to the youth group.
Oh, right.
And he said, we play football and there's girls there. So I was just at that age when I was becoming interested in both, and his name was Roger Wilde and his wife's name was Di, and they were fantastic. I can never remember anything that they taught me, but I can remember everything that they did. And the way that they treated people unconditionally. You know, my family was okay. We lived on a council estate. My mum and dad had poorly paid jobs. There were 5 of us, five children, and it was quite tough, especially a couple of times when my dad got made redundant a couple of times. But there wasn't a lot of chaos. My dad was the sort of he'd fought in the Second World War against the Japanese, and that had obviously affected him, and so sometimes it was quite hard in the family. But we didn't have a bad upbringing. No. But I was challenging, let's say.
Which might be helpful in your present situation.
Yeah. What, you mean knowing you?
You're knowing me and others.
Yeah. So we, as I say, Roger and Di met me, and it was just their unconditional love. First time I'd ever met anything like that.
Right.
Where, you know, no matter what we did, they didn't condone it, but they always sort of tried to help us through stuff. Yes. And they were a big part of my sort of mid-late teens.
Can I just say that previously we've talked about the process of somebody coming to faith, and we may be involved in somebody's life and we never see the end product of it, and it's very, very helpful hearing that just you know, it's not direct in your face evangelism, but it's part of the jigsaw puzzle, isn't it?
And you know, a lot of people come to faith just like that. You know, they hear the gospel and bang, they come like that. I've had people, you know, when I've preached who've done that. I've seen people do that. Mine was more a sort of steady coming to faith. I can pin it down to a day when I finally said, yes, this is for me, but it took a number of years and before I cottoned on. And I think then it was a matter of, did I accept Jesus as my saviour? Yeah. Did I accept him as my Lord? Probably not.
Which is one of the conversations we've been having in this series.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, that's very interesting, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm probably in my early 20s now. I'm just about married. And I'm moving over to live in Lincolnshire, near Grimsby, because I've been offered a job. I was an accountant at this point. So I've gone into accountancy. Going to church,
right?
When I'm not playing football.
Okay, get the priorities right.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by
yes,
you know. But went to Grimsby, and I remember one night just being invited by some couple of male friends of ours, because we started to go to church in Grimsby. We went to the Anglican church, but it was dead as a dodo as far as children's work was concerned. But they said, try the Methodist church next door. So we went to the Methodist church next door, because they had brilliant family work, and you know, we had two small children at this point. And we went there and started to get more involved. And I remember two guys saying to me, come to this businessman's dinner with us. This Christian guy is going to speak to us. And I remember coming back from that and sitting on the bed and thinking to myself, Jesus did all this for me. What have I ever done for him?
Wow. Okay.
And again, so I've had these sort of just these turning points in my life. These I call them signposts in my life, where God has come along and he's just posted me off into a different direction from where I was going. And I remember sitting there and then thinking, it's not that I can earn my way into heaven. Jesus has already done that for me. But, you know, I've suddenly realised that I am thankful for what he's done for me.
Okay.
And that translated itself into action. It's like when when you come to love your wife, or you find a girlfriend or a husband, or whatever, and you want to do things for them, not because you want to impress them, but just because it's the right love.
Let me throw in a question, because it's relevant to what you're saying. Matt's asked the question, could you, I think you're answering it as you talk, but Paul, could you define the lordship of Jesus for us?
Okay. Yeah. So I want all the benefits. The lordship of Jesus is, if you like, his rule over my life.
Right, yeah.
And it's very easy to see that in terms of must do this, must do that. It's not that sort of thing at all. No. It is this thing where you are grateful and you are thankful for what God has done for you, and you want to get involved in his kingdom.
Absolutely. Hallelujah. Yeah.
So you just want to, I discovered all this stuff going on that I'd not discovered before, and I wanted to be part of it. And again, there was another signpost that happened just after that, where I started to go to Bible study. I started to learn more about God. I started to learn that he loved me, because love was a difficult thing in my house, my household. Yes. I discovered that I had gifts that God had given me, as well as money, as well as possessions, as well as other, family and so on. But they were for me to use, not to keep to myself selfishly. So it's the fact that everything that I have belongs to God is my is the lordship, and it's for me to use it for him.
I think that's a very helpful definition, and if you're struggling with that, then what Paul was saying, it's not a list of do's and don'ts and rules and it's a love response, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just want your will in my life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
It's like if I bring my wife some flowers on, which of course I do all the time, and I say, here's some flowers, darling, but I want you to make sure you iron my shirts. That's not what it is. I bring those flowers because I love her, as a token of my love, out of my heart, and you get to the point where you understand God and you want to do things from the depth of your own love.
Yeah, absolutely. So just taking a bit of a leap forward, eventually this offering of yourself, your gifts, leads into Christian ministry precisely, and then from there it comes into prison work. Can you briefly just track the journey there?
Well, I think it started just a couple of years after that. Billy Graham came and he did a satellite mission. I don't know if some people might remember that. And we were, from our church, we went out to invite people to come and watch it in Grimsby. And And I met so much need on the doorstep, and so many people had questions that were not being answered, things that they'd been holding on to, difficulties that they were having with life. And God just started to speak to me and you know, give me a heart for those people, that to get alongside them, to help them. And these were generally people, you know, who were ignored by church, or felt ignored by church, even if they weren't. And you know, and I remember a lot of people came as a result of that to church. They found their needs met, but that just made my appetite get bigger. And so I began to pray about it, began to think about it, and I remember, everyone will know this guy probably, a guy called Nicky Cruz.
Right, yes.
And they used to have a big Christian thing called the Ice House in Grimsby, and they used to invite speakers along, and Nicky came to speak. And I remember at the end of the thing, he made a call forward, not for people to become Christians, but actually for people to come and serve God in ministry, in some sort of ministry, not necessarily an authorised ministry, but a ministry. And I was sat at the end of a row, because we'd taken our youth group with us, and I felt like I was pushed out of my chair.
Really?
I was probably resisting, because I thought I don't normally do that sort of thing. But I felt pushed out of my chair.
Right.
And ended up at the front.
What am I doing here?
And that's exactly what happened, Clive, because Nicky Cruz said, there's a guy here who's thinking, what am I doing here?
Oh, really?
Yeah. And you were going into prison ministry.
Now, I didn't know that, okay? This isn't a setup. No. I did not know that.
And I thought,
right.
Well,
he said you're going into prison ministry.
Yeah.
My goodness, that's a big step.
Are you going to work with prisoners?
Right.
And I was just like, well, that can't be me. That can't be me.
Yeah.
But I got the ministry bit. Yeah. You know, so I went forward. There were a couple of other signs, people coming forward to me saying, have you thought about, I've been praying about, you should think about this. And I was, as I said, I was in a Methodist church at that point, and I didn't particularly like the way that Methodists did
the circuits.
The circuit.
Yeah.
I like to be among people, looking after the same people day in, day out, or week in, week out, whereas on a circuit you go around maybe 10, 12 churches. But we were in a local ecumenical project with the Anglicans, and I'd always been brought up an Anglican, and the two ministers got on really well, and Keith, who was the Methodist minister, went to Brian, I think you should give Paul a go.
Right.
And put him forward to ministry. And we went through the sausage machine.
Yeah.
I went to theological college.
Right.
While I was in theological college, we had to do a 2-week placement somewhere, and it was hospital or industrial chaplain or prison chaplain, and I can't stand hospitals. I didn't know much about industrial chaplaincy, so I remembered what Nicky Cruz had said, so I put my name down for the prison chaplaincy.
Right.
And did 2 weeks in a small Category C, Category D prison in Kent, and I just loved it.
Right.
You know, just again, that hunger from people, wanting to know, wanting to talk, wanting you to pray for them, wanting just to get alongside people in their troubles.
Yes.
And we used to help people. They used to help people go back into the community as well. So it was, after that, it was sort of nailed on.
Yes. Just to point out again, because all this ties in, and we've got no script, we're just chatting here, but when we talked 2 weeks ago about Jesus calling people, And it's very helpful to reflect on how the Lord's called you, because Paul's got his own unique story. I've got mine. It's not a very happy story, but I was sort of jobless and in a telephone booth, and I just phoned and offered myself for work in the Salvation Army. Not at all. Fiona always thought I was a very spiritual person, but it was very pragmatic. I need a job. But the Lord's calling on our life, it's so creative, but the pieces come together, doesn't it? So I think that. So Nicky Cruz wouldn't have had a clue.
I never even met him.
Never even met him.
I didn't even talk to him at the end.
It's just the pieces falling in together.
Yeah.
Which has, for however many years, has defined your life.
Yeah. And then of course I was from Grimsby. They sent me back to Grimsby to be a curate in an Anglican church, which was on the edge of the town centre and the docks. Really poor area, about third poorest area in Yorkshire and Humberside. And I ended up working with a lot of young guys who were in and out of prison and on the edge of prison and being kicked out of school. We had a youth club on the site as well. I remember John, the minister, he was deeply compassionate about the young people of that area. He worked there for 25 years. And I worked there for 4, and I got to see some of the stuff that he did. And so there was this pattern, this thread running through the whole thing. So when I finished being a curate and I had to find a job, and I thought about going into prison ministry and parish ministry. So I thought, which shall it be? And then this advert came along for a job which was both.
Oh right, yes.
So it's part-time prison chaplain and the rest, full-time, looking after 3 churches.
Could I say that's been the parallel of my life for the past quite a number of years as well, part-time.
Yeah. And funnily enough, another God thing, it was the same prison that I did my 2 weeks of...
Oh right, so you were back where you were.
So I was back there. Did that, and they closed that prison in late 1999, early 2000s. So that's where we are in terms of time. And they closed that prison then when they introduced ankle tagging.
Right.
As a way of looking after people when they came out of prison. And they closed that prison saying, well, the prison population's going to go down now, so we won't need little prisons like this. The prison population was 46,000.
Goodness me.
It's more than double that now.
Yes.
And I really missed it. So one of the assistant chaplain generals used to give me a call every 3 months and say, Paul, we've got some full-time jobs, would you like to come? And I'm saying, well, no, the bishop's given me another church to look after, it's not the right time. I want to stay here. And I stayed a couple of years and then I gave in.
Few comments coming in here. Perhaps you'll address this later. Maddie has said, going into prison ministry, there's a bit of a typing error there, but to say, I think she's saying it must take a lot of bravery, and perhaps we'll talk about that. Maggie has said, it's so encouraging to hear how God led you step by step as you were wanting to be obedient. Matt's replied, yes, it's amazing what God will do with you and through you when you are simply obedient to him.
Yeah.
A verse we often quote from Philippians, that the will of God is good, pleasing and perfect. And there is a pleasure.
Yeah, the obedience thing takes us back to that thing we were talking about, lordship.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like obedience. It just feels like you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's not like, my dad used to stand over me going, you must do this. And used to watch me until I did it. It doesn't feel oppressive in any way, shape or form. And if it does feel oppressive, I think, my experience of working in church and prison is, if you feel oppressed by obedience, it's probably not the right thing that you're being asked to do.
Yeah. well, let's talk a little bit more. In about 5 minutes, we'll go to notices and the song. Do you just want to address this? Because some people think going into a prison, and we work in a high security prison, there are different categories of prisons, aren't there?
Yeah.
Where we work, it's high security. People often have this concept that it's sometimes a dangerous thing to do. You have to be very brave to work in that place. But you feel at home there. I feel at home.
Yeah. Do you know why though? Because I don't know why. But well, I will say this. Yeah. My experience of people coming to minister or volunteer or work in prison is it's like Marmite, and you either love it or you hate it.
Right. Okay.
There's not a lot in between, and some people hate it and still stick with it, which is
it's not good.
Usually down to their circumstances and never turns out well. Or you love it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's about people.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, it's about who you are.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, it's about how you treat others. And Jesus' command to say, treat others as you would have them treat you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that can be really difficult. Sometimes you just have to suck things up, you know, and you know, I'll give you an example or two in a few minutes, maybe in the next bit.
Yeah.
But in terms of safety, there's lots of people around to keep you safe.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There is still that latent respect for ministers of religion.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There's still there's a lot of respect for people who come into prisons and volunteer.
Yes.
Probably even more than there is for us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They love volunteers.
Absolutely.
Because they, you know,
There's
let's face it, we get paid.
Yes. Yes.
But the volunteers come in for nothing, and they're giving it, as the prisoners see it, they're giving it out of the love from their heart.
Yes.
And you know, I've known prisoners keep people safe in prison, even in the high security estate.
Yeah.
So, but it's about forming those relationships. It's about having faith in God that if He's called you into the right place, He'll protect you. And I've always found that to be true. And you know, I only know one prison chaplain who's ever suffered at the hands of a prisoner.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Now, when you consider prison chaplains have been going into prisons for 100 years.
Yes, quite.
And there's 140 prisons in England and Wales.
Yes.
That is an enormous amount of times that you know chaplains have been into a prison and been safe.
Yes.
So there's a minuscule chance, and that and all putting all those things together, that helps you to feel safe. But finally, I would say that most people who are in prison have done something. I never generally ask them what, because to me it's only relevant if they want to talk about it.
Right.
You know, I think 99% of us don't go around being bad 90% of the time. We're just normal people.
Yes.
And prisoners are exactly the same.
Yeah.
They're normal people trying to get on with life, trying to fix things often, or trying to ignore what's causing them the issues. But they're not, you know, thinking every 2 minutes, what sort of wrong thing can I do today? And you know, they're just people. They're just people, and you know, I sometimes joke with people, and I say, you know, some of my best friends are murderers. Probably some of my best acquaintances are murderers.
Right.
Because we're not allowed to be friends as such. We've got to keep those professional boundaries in place.
There's a lovely phrase that you can be friendly but not friends, and that defines it for us.
That's right. Yeah. So, and you know, we can sit and have a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, a biscuit, usually Jacob's biscuits.
Yes.
That's a private thing.
Okay.
But, and as if you were just talking in, say, the cafe upstairs here.
Quite, yes.
Yeah.
Before we go, a few comments just come in, and perhaps you'd like to address this one because it just refers back to what you were saying about your journey. Verity's asking that when you went to theological college, how did you cope financially as a family when you went to college? You know, you left your job and you had 5 children to support. But was that, as sometimes we, you know, living by faith, or?
I didn't have 5 then.
Okay. Verity, it didn't have 5. Yeah, he had 3. Right.
Well, the diocese helped.
Okay.
You know, they paid all the fees.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And a sort of living allowance. We lived on the campus.
Right. Yeah.
My wife worked.
Okay. Right.
Part-time.
Yes.
And we had some savings as well that we used from selling our house.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So
well, I think for a lot of us who've stepped out, in a sense, into the unknown, if God calls, He provides. That's what we teach from Jesus' teaching in Matthew. Don't be anxious about what you shall eat, what you shall drink, what you shall wear. Seek first His kingdom, and these things will be added to you. And again, there's a variety of ways that God provides. But if you're being obedient to Him, putting it crudely, He picks up the bill, and He does provide. One last comment. Matt commented on what you're saying about how we treat people. Excuse me. It's about how you can help to free others like Jesus did. I mean, and again, we often say it, we meet people where they are. You can't expect people to be in a different place. That's where they are. That you meet them there, and then see how the journey moves on.
There's I don't. 9/11, there was a chaplain of the fire service, and he was killed.
Right.
And his prayer used to be, and I've got it on my wall at work, it says, Lord God, help me today. Help me meet people and have conversations with them. Help me be there for them, and then keep me out of the way.
Right.
And I think it's that, because he does the work.
Yes.
You know, we're the conduit, if you like, to introduce people to God's love. But sometimes we stand in the way and we try and create people in our image instead of allowing God to create them in His.
Yep. Last comment, and then we will go to the notices. Jane, part of our leadership of our church, she's been with me into the prison, and Jane's commented and saying, I've been into a prison as a volunteer on a couple of occasions and felt very safe, appreciated and respected. And I can only echo what Paul has said. And we might have opportunity before we finish this evening. If you're interested in helping in the chaplaincy, then there are doors of opportunity. When Jane came with me, the men so deeply appreciated it, and it was good for Jane as well. It just broadens our ministry. Anyway, let's go to the notices that Matt will bring us. There's a song. I'm afraid I don't know this song. Perhaps I should. It's one of Matt's songs, I think. We'll listen to it, then we'll be back. And we're going to talk particularly about the work of a Christian chaplain and some of the courses, some of the outcomes that we see that. So we'll see you in a few moments. Thank you very much. Well, I hope you enjoyed the song. It's a new song that Matt's written. We're picking up on the comments, and Maddie, you've made a comment saying that you used to go to a youth offenders, which was at Feltham. Well, lo and behold, what can we say, Paul?
I used to be at Feltham from 2002 until I came here in 2010. So
well, there we go. That was Paul's experience before his present appointment. So we're going to spend the next 15 minutes or so just talking specifically about the ministry of the Christian chaplain. We are in What I've found an interesting and new exercise is working within a multi-faith team, still maintaining your Christian identity, but working as a team with all other faiths. It's
being a chaplain, there's sort of generic stuff.
Yes.
So there's looking after people. In terms of visiting people who are in segregation unit or in the hospital, or dealing with people who are having bereavements and so on and so forth, which is fairly generic. And then of course you can be yourself as well, because we can teach our faith. People register as a particular faith when they come into a prison, and can either meet or not with the minister, and we can do quite a lot.
Yes. Specifically out of your ministry, and I'd share some of the time with Paul, but Paul, that's his full-time occupation there. So how does ministering the gospel work in a prison setting then?
I think it depends on
the person,
you yourself, right? So but for me it is about forming those relationships. So the first thing I did when I went to where we are now is I went to the serving place where lunch is served on the different wings every day, and I just stood there and said hello to everybody. So it wasn't a fair thing, but it just so that people got to know who I was, why I was there, and so on. So it was just getting to know people. And it'll vary from prison to prison as well, because we have people for quite a long time. But when I was in Feltham, for instance, the average stay in Feltham was 4 months.
Okay, so it's
we're the average stay where we are is probably 7 or 8 years.
Right. Yes.
So again, that will formulate how you work.
Absolutely.
But it's about relationships, it's about being there, it's about getting to know people, striking up those conversations. They're always inquisitive about who we are, what we believe, even if they're not Christians. There might be another faith, or they want to know about what Christians believe, or sometimes try and convert me. So that's always an interesting exercise. And then you draw people in. So I have we have a thing that is called Kairos, where once a year we get 12 or 18, sometimes 24 guys who come and meet 20 volunteers for a whole week in the chapel and do various things. It's a bit like a cross between a spiritual retreat and an alpha course, and that's designed to just draw people further into the chaplaincy, into the work of the Christian chaplaincy particularly, and to start them off. And then we'll do various other things like you would in a church. So we've got I have a group called a GLUE group,
which stands for
God, Life, the Universe and Everything. And it's basically where people can just come and ask questions about God, Life, the Universe and Everything. And we sit and discuss just over a cup of coffee in an evening. We'll have I don't use Alpha, not because I've got anything against it, but there is a specific course called Christianity Explored, which is written for prisoners, and I find that works really well. So we get a group of guys who do that, and then they might make a commitment to Christ and want to move on in their discipleship. And I think discipleship is really important.
Yes,
because Jesus didn't say come and convert everyone, he said make disciples. So that's...
And Paul hasn't heard our first conversation, but that was exactly what we said the first time.
And I think that is crucial, that is key, because those guys then become lights. You sang about lights, I think, a minute ago. They become lights on their wing, on their spur, among the men, and people then become inquisitive as to why they've changed. Sometimes they get the mickey taken out of them, or worse, but other times people are inquisitive about why they've changed and what that change is about.
Yes.
And so you begin to work as almost like a team.
And in times past, people used to talk about trophies of grace when somebody, amazing transformation. But there have been some amazing stories of change, haven't there? And can we take a moment, because Paul is very much involved in an exercise called the Sycamore course, because that's very important, is it, to our work. Let's just describe that for a moment.
One of the things that the guys have to do, particularly if they're in prison for any length of time, past maybe a year, is deal with their offending behaviour. And an organisation called Prison Fellowship, who some of you might have heard from, if you haven't, have a look at their website. It's Prison Fellowship England and Wales, and just Google it, or others are available. So have a look on there. But they have to deal with their offending behaviour, and Prison Fellowship put together a course, a victim awareness course, and linked into that is the aspect of restorative justice. So it's a Christian-based course, but not faith-promoting, which means that in prison terms, anyone of any faith or no faith can come to it. So we're not going to be there to convert people to Jesus. That's not the aim of it. The aim of it is to deal with their offending behaviour. And we do it through the story of Zacchaeus, of course, how he came to meet Jesus, what he was up to before, which was basically extorting money from his community, and causing a lot of, when you look into it, a lot of heartfelt pain and difficulty within his community by the way he took the money away and stuff like that. Not just the tax, but his own cut. And then, of course, he met with Jesus. They had a conversation. We don't know what that was. But at the end of it, he gave back 4 times what he stole, which was the law. So he kept the law. And he then gave back half of what he had left to the community. And that is an example of restorative justice, restoring, putting right what you did wrong. So it's not just about saying, oh, I'm sorry, but it's actually about doing something about it that shows you're sorry. And we do this course with up to about 40 lads a year. So we do it several times. And you can see the transformation. For some of them, it's the first time that they've actually realised that they've created victims, which might sound like a silly thing, but actually they may never meet their victim again. It may be 5 seconds in a street. It may be that they stole something and the person that they stole from wasn't there when it was stolen. But we look at the impact that crime causes on people and on them and on their families and the families of the people that were affected. And through that we find that actually a lot of people start to think more about faith in any, although it's not faith promoting, they start to think about life in a bigger way. I always describe it as like we're moving their vision from their own navel up, lifting their chin up so that they can see the big picture. And that has led a lot of people into a place of thinking more deeply about spiritual things.
And in my involvement with that course at times, one of the biggest impact is when they actually meet somebody person to person who has been a victim. And occasionally it does result in somebody meeting not their direct victim maybe, but a member of their family and some...
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lady who comes in as a victim of crime. Her son was stabbed by someone else, and she actually met with the guy who stabbed her son, and her son had done Sycamore Tree with us, he became a Christian, he got baptised, and this lady met him in our chaplaincy.
Right, amazing, isn't it?
And he's toddled off to another prison. He's doing what he needs to do to finish the rest of his sentence. She now comes in and shares her story with the other guys halfway through the course on week 3. And it's just so powerful, not just them seeing the impact that it's had on her, but knowing that there can be a resolution to it. And we've probably got a dozen or 15 occasions now where someone from the family has met the perpetrator.
I wanted Paul to mention that because sometimes we can't grasp the depth of forgiveness that is available. And all forgiveness has its origin in God. And when we understand the depth that we've been forgiven, then it's easier to see how forgiveness can be given to others. If we've got a shallow understanding of our own need of forgiveness, then we can get a bit judgmental about other people. But the gospel that we believe in is that there is nothing that I am or that I've done that is beyond the grace of God. That's.
Can I say it sometimes works the other way as well, actually, that the guys go through this, and we've had occasions more often than not where the victim's family has forgiven the perpetrator, and as a result of receiving forgiveness from someone else for a really serious thing that they often think, well, if that happened to me, I don't know how I could ever forgive them. They then begin to think about God and God's forgiveness of them.
So if a human can do that,
then God must be able to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it sometimes leads the other way.
I'd said to Paul while the notices were on, not that we weren't listening, but actually we could continue this conversation for an hour, and we're only slightly touching on things. But what about this question of forgiveness and yet still having to serve your time, the punishment that the courts have laid upon you?
Well, it's not just punishment.
Right.
It is punishment.
Right.
But it's also protection.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We have to remember that people are put behind bars for the protection of society.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And generally, they'll get a sentence that reflects what they've done, which might be short, it might be long. If it's a life sentence, then they have to prove that they're in a position where they are safe to come out of prison.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's the human system. Just because we're forgiven, God doesn't if you like, erase all the consequences. We're going to have whatever sin that we commit, there are consequences to it that we have to either live with and try and resolve. And some of them will resolve it by coming to the end of their sentence, some of it resolve by getting together with the victims and asking for forgiveness, and quite often they'll get it, actually, which is really a wonderful thing. But but God doesn't remove the consequences of everything that we do in this human life.
No.
Eternally, we know that He does, because Jesus took those consequences.
Yes.
But we still have to face things in the human domain, if you like.
Yes. There was one of the things that inspired me right from the beginning when Fiona and I first began our married ministry together. We've been involved in the judicial system in one way or another, but certainly in the period I've been in this town, one of the things that inspired me, I heard somebody who was part of it's now called the Independent Monitoring Board, sort of an outside body that just monitors life in prison, and he said that people are sent to prison as punishment, not for punishment. And when I heard that, it was so clarifying. So they're not there we're not there to make them suffer more. Being in prison is, the consequences of that personally and for their family are horrendous. So going back to what Paul was saying, that we treat them with dignity, humanity, with respect, firmness, and clarity. But while they're in prison, they're experiencing that alienation from family and all sorts of things, and it's just we did have a visitor come to the prison once who said that we shouldn't talk about hope, and I did agree with that. we do give a message of hope, don't we?
Well, I mean, sometimes, Clive, we meet young men, because that's who we work with, who have received a sentence from the courts which is longer than they've actually been alive.
Yes.
Now, I don't know how you get your head around that, and a lot of them really, really struggle with it. And a lot come to prison because we're dealing with people who've got long sentences a lot of the time. And if that person finds that they can have some hope and some purpose, actually, it changes behaviour.
Yes.
It changes their outlook towards other people. Quite often they've got into that situation in the first place because they had no hope and because they had no purpose. Or their purpose was something that was antisocial. But often it's because they had no hope and they had no purpose. They didn't believe they had a future. They didn't believe anybody loved them or cared for them, and it didn't matter if they died or lived.
Right.
And when they meet people, so we talk about volunteers like Jane who came in, and others. When they meet people who can provide them with hope, can show them that there is a purpose, even working alongside other prisoners, because part of our job is to help settle people into their sentence and keep people in the prison safe.
Yes.
Because a lot of people work there.
Yes.
And it can be a volatile place from time to time, but we want to make it as safe as possible for all the prisoners, for all the staff, for everybody who might come in.
Absolutely.
And providing that hope gives that.
We're drawing to the end of our time. This might have inspired you. As Paul said, it's not everybody's calling, but if you feel that it's something that you should explore, how do people get involved in prison ministry? I know how I got involved, but what would be your advice?
Okay, well, we're going to be talking to people who are not necessarily from the area where we are. Is there a prison near you? If there's a prison near you, go and get the phone number and ask to speak to the chaplain.
Right.
You can ask to speak to the managing chaplain first, or the Christian, one of the Christian chaplains, because it might not be necessarily the same. So do that. Another way to do it is I mentioned Prison Fellowship earlier. They have 4,000 volunteers who go into prison, not just to do the sycamore tree, but to do Bible studies, worship on a Sunday, all sorts of help with groups and things like that. They will train you.
Right.
They'll help you get into prisons. So look them up on the website, Prison Fellowship England and Wales. And get in contact with them. You may be part of a church which has already got a prison ministry, so speak to the person that runs that. And it might be just a small thing like saying, look, I'm not sure about this, I think there might be something for me, can I just come and talk to you, can I have a look round?
Yes, right.
And see what it's like.
Yes.
There are other things as well. If you, there are other needs within prison. So there's an organisation called Official Prison Visitors, for instance, which isn't a faith-based thing, but often is run by chaplaincy, where you can volunteer as a person to visit people in prison who don't normally get a visit. They've got no family, or the family have cut them off, and you can volunteer and come and sit in the visits hall as if you were their family or their friend.
Yes. Yeah.
There are other organisations as well, which you mentioned the IMB, which the Independent Monitoring Board,
very important,
which is they're independent. They report to the Home Office about prisons. Again, you get training to do that. So there's all sorts of things that you can do.
I hope you found this evening helpful. So the point of the evening was there a point? Yes, it was. It's called Faith in Action. So all that we believe, all that we teach about being a disciple of Jesus and the kingdom of God, in this instance, in this way, this is how it's worked out. I'm going to put Paul on the spot there, because we've had an evening without reading the Bible or quoting the Bible. What are a few verses from the Bible that inspire you, that motivate you?
There was when I was thinking about ministry, there was the bit where I always felt I was a bit of a rotter.
Right.
So there's the bit where Peter gets reinstated by Jesus, and he says, "Go and feed my lambs. Go and feed my lambs. Go and feed my sheep." That inspires me. There's the bit in Matthew about visiting people in prison, in Matthew 25, and that inspires me because. It also talks about people who are poor and so on. So, a lot of prisoners have come from that background. So, I'd like to see us working with people out there before they even get to prisons, because prison is the last resort, really, for a lot of people. So, that inspires me. And I think one of the verses that really inspires me is in Romans chapter 8, where Paul talks about God's love and how nothing can separate us from it.
You see, I told you this wasn't scripted. That was my sermon last Sunday.
That's my sermon this Sunday.
Okay.
but nothing can separate us from the love of God.
He says, "I am convinced."
And I am convinced. He's convinced because he's experienced it. Because he's done it. He's put his faith in action, and that's how it pans out. And the guys need to know that. Most of the people we work with don't understand what love is. It's sexualized. It's you do something to get something. It's that sort of conditional love. Try and impress people, but teaching the guys through what we do that we can love them unconditionally. To go back to Diane Roger Wilde, who brought me into this in the first place, is that unconditional love, and it's that unconditional love that we can't be separated from.
No. We've got to conclude. Thank you for those who've shared in there. So people have said thank you both for this evening. Very interesting. Maggie, thank you both so much. Good to hear a bit more about chaplaincy in prisons. Yes. There are a lot of people do understand it, but some people have misconceptions, and we hope this has just shed light on. We did have somebody who described the local prison as a dark and dreadful place. Actually, we don't experience that at all. It's where we go, we take the kingdom of God and bring his life and his love and his grace, and it really is a privilege to be doing that. So I do want to thank Paul for giving up his Friday evening. He works full-time during the week, so Friday is usually a time at home with the family, so we really appreciate you coming out. And thank you, Jane, for you're not going to be sacked, even though there were some technical hitches maybe at the beginning. Thank you, Matt, for the song. I get the jibe that I would have known it if I'd bought your CD. So I'll plug my book, which I haven't written yet, but I'm going to, and so, no, I'm not. And that's a joke between me and Matt. Okay, God bless you.
Thank you.
Next week we're back on the series of discipleship, just looking at the implications of that, and we hope you'll join us again. God bless you. Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.